So if you've been following the channel, what we've been doing is pulling these things apart and taking the bits and pieces out of them to do stuff with it. And so far we've done quite a few things actually. We've made a windmill, we've done a solar concentrator, we've done conductive glass, done a solar cell, we've done recovering the indium, so quite a few things that you can do with the bits that are in here. If you want to follow taking this apart, there's an earlier video that does exactly that. Once we get all the bits out of it, there's one very cool bit, which is this. This is a lump of acrylic, but it's not ordinary acrylic, obviously. It's in an LCD, so it's actually optical quality acrylic. So it's very good and very clear. And you can use it for lots of kinds of things if it didn't have this surface on it. What happens is the light enters at the sides and then gets bounced around inside, apart from these tiny pits where when it hits a pit it comes straight out. It's then focused with a lens and goes through your LCD screen. So it's really important that there's a very low loss of light and that it actually does that, and that's why they use optical quality acrylic in there to enable it to do that. So if we could get rid of that easily, we'd have a beautiful piece of optical acrylic that is actually worth quite a lot of money. What we're looking for is where we can get it to that sort of clarity. But we want to be able to do that really easily and really cheaply. And thankfully enough, we can do exactly that. So there's our bit of acrylic, and we've got those pits facing upwards, and we've got a bit of wire wool and then some cellulose thinner. You can get this from just about any car store or do-it-yourself store. And all you do is put a spot of cellulose thinner on, take your wire wool and go over it. Now you'll hear it scraping. It makes a kind of light scraping noise. When that scraping noise is no longer happening, then it's finished. So we just go over the whole surface until we can't hear that zhuzh noise. So when you've done that, you just leave it to dry. Now obviously it's cellulose thinner, so do it in a vented area and just twizzle it in the light, and you'll be able to see whether you've got any of the pits still on there just by the reflections. If you have, go over it again. And now we just leave that to dry. When it's dry, take some tea cut and a sander. You can use a buffer if you happen to have one. I've got an orbital sander that I've stuck a cloth on, but if you have a buffer, use a buffer. It does a better job. Pour on some tea cut and go over it with your sander. And when you finish, give it a bit of a clean, and that's what you get. Okay, so I've basically shown you one really simple technique where you can get the materials anywhere and they're not that expensive. And there are obviously lots of techniques for doing this. One thing actually is, instead of using the tea cut, you can use this stuff, which is cerumeum oxide polishing compound. It's also called jeweler's rouge. You can get this from the pittery shops. It does a far better job than tea cut. You just mix it with water and go over it the same way. We used a reciprocating sander because that's what most people have got. It's obviously better if you use a circular one that does that motion. Even better if you've got a car buffer or a car polisher, or if you have a buffer wheel, that's even better. So there's lots of different things you can do and different techniques you can use to improve that job. I've just showed you these really simple techniques with these really readily available compounds just to get you going, really. And it's like anything, don't expect to do a good job with it tomorrow. You do need a little bit of practice to get good at this. But this optical acrylic actually is worth a small fortune, so it's really worth the trouble of doing that, because with a minimum tools and a little bit of effort, you can turn what was going to be scrap into something really useful. We can cut this stuff into little squares and actually make lenses and prisms out of this, which is astonishing. Now there is another really good polishing technique, which is flame polishing. Basically, you turn a flame on it. I'm actually rubbish at that, and I'm rubbish at that because I hold the flame too long. What I tend to use is a heat gun and heat polish it instead of flame polish it. It does the same thing, but I can keep an eye on this much easier, and the force isn't so great, so I don't have to be so responsive to it. You just turn on the heat gun and cast your eye over the reflections past the heat gun, and you will see it melting and going clear, and then you'll get that nice polishing effect across the surface that you actually want. So tons of techniques to play with. The basic technique is clean off the pits with the cellulose thinner, let it dry, and then polish it. And the polishing can be done with something as simple as T-cut, something like cerumium oxide, or something like flame or heat. And that will turn what was a piece of junk into actually a very valuable material, because remember, this material has high optical qualities. So one thing you can certainly do with this material is make lenses and prisms, and they are very sellable. Anyway, I thought I would share that idea with you because I was asked, really, is there something we can do with these bits where we can make a product that we could put up for sale with the minimum investment and the minimum amount of material requirement. Obviously, if you've got a few LCDs, particularly the ones where you get this material that are centimetre thick, you could look at polishing it, selling it straight away as a polished sheet, or cutting it into lenses, making lenses and selling the lenses. That, I think, would be a really interesting thing to do with what was otherwise just going to be thrown away. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching.